Welcome back, you guys. I'm Nini FC, this is Brilliant CV, and welcome to another Talking Points video after our 2-2 draw against Valencia last night. Now in today's video, I'll be talking about Frank Lampard and the mistakes he made in the game. I'll be speaking about the fullback dilemma again, and to end things, I'll be speaking about whether this team is missing Mason Mount. But before I even get into anything, you guys, as you know, today's video is brought to you by the OneFootball app. At this point, you should know what to do by now. In the description below, download the app. And one more quick plug, you guys. Now that it's Black Friday, of course, the Club Megastore has its very own sale right now. Right now, you can get all club items 25% off. It comes at the perfect time with Christmas being around the corner. I admit, I've got one or two things to add to my collection for this season. If you guys want to get something now is the best time. You'll find links below in the description below. Now let's start with the first talking point. And did Lampard make a mistake in yesterday's game? Well, I feel like he did, and I think the biggest mistake he made was the team lineup selection for the start of the game. And I'm talking about Aspie playing as a left back and obviously Reece on the right. Now of course there was nothing wrong with Reece at all, but I really feel like Aspie's use and role in the team last night's game didn't help us, and in fact caused way more issues than positives. As you guys can see beside me, here's the heat maps and the average player positionings of both teams' players in yesterday's game. As you can see, Valencia focused nearly all their attacks down our right hand side, and as you can see with our team shape, it was basically non-existent. It wasn't there. And if you see the positions of Azpilicueta just being isolated by himself all the time, well, it's not really a surprise. And you know, for me, you guys, I was a bit disappointed that Lampard didn't have any tactical changes earlier on in that game, because I just think, for me, if you know that Valencia are a team that are very good attacking down that side, and that's an area in which they predominantly focus their attacks, then why make their lives easier? You know, why are we creating overloads down the right hand side? Instead, we should have created overloads down the left hand side, a left hand side where we tend to focus all our attacks anyway. I mean, if you look at the previous games we've played in, if you look at our average positions, our action zones, etc, etc, you see that we focus all our attacks down the left-hand sides. If we had applied the same things against Valencia last night, we could have really stifled some of their attacking threat down that side. It would have limited what they could do, and it would have forced their attacking players to have to come back and help defend. But anyway, you guys, I mean, I understand. I get it. Emerson wasn't perfect against Man City. Lampard thought that Azpilicueta was very good against Man City, and he was. Let's not deny that. Reece James is a top-class, potential world-class player in the making, and it's obvious that Lampard has been trying to find a way to use Reece in the team, but it feels like Lampard doesn't feel confident not having Aspie playing at the back. Maybe Lampard thinks this is leadership, that's the important thing, but I think it tends to stem from Aspie's experience that he adds to games, and against Man City we saw countless crucial blocks and interceptions that Aspie made. But in a game like this where it's going to be open and you need to play football, is Aspie really your best solution? I don't think so. By focusing the attacks down the right hand side, it meant that our team shape wasn't there. As you can see, William was playing very close alongside our striker, and Pulisic was forced to drift infield a lot more because there was no Mason Mount playing between the lines to really allow Pulisic to do his thing. And by doing that, it created an imbalance where most players were focused down the right hand side, and this meant it was very easy for Valencia to create counter-attacking opportunities against us. And that's because they had all the space and freedom down the opposite flank, because players were caught out of position, players were caught in no man's land, the gaps between our midfield and our defence were far too big, and this confusion really made Valencia's lives a lot easier. I really feel like if both Emerson and Reece played together, a lot of the mistakes we saw in last night's game wouldn't have come. You know, I looked at certain things from certain players. I wasn't seeing the same normal passes. I wasn't seeing the same normal movement. And I thought at times our attacking players can kind of suffer a tiny bit if they don't have the right support in the wide areas. You know, I barely saw any passes between Pulisic and Azpilicueta. And watching Aspie, it felt like the team were very reluctant to even pass to the player in the first place. Again though, continuing on with the mistakes, was using a back five near the end the best approach as well? I'm not too sure, you guys, because by playing that way, it meant that Valencia had more onus to attack us and play within our half. By playing this way, There's more onus on Mitchie to have to keep the ball and hold possession up, and that's something that he's not very effective or as good at doing. And of course, it means that our midfielders have to work even harder to make up the ground, and as we could see in the latter half of the game, Kova and Kante were always forced to go on long bursting runs to have to progress the ball or come back into position to help defend. Yeah, of course, we did become a bit tighter in that second half, but was it enough? And for my final reason, the makeshift defence. Now, as I've seen this season, whenever a consistent back four aren't playing together, that's when you tend to see mistakes. Zuma's always been best playing down that right-hand side, that's been his best position. Playing down the left meant that his use of the ball had to be more creative. He had to find players between the lines more. And we know that Zuma, even though he's good technically, he isn't that type of playmaker defender that's going to play those creative passes. So it then means our build-up play from the back isn't as good because we have two players that aren't as effective in helping progress the ball, and that only puts further stress on other players on the field. I don't know, you guys, I felt like maybe Lampard tinkered a bit too much. Maybe he was forced to do that because of the intense game against Man City. Maybe he thought that some players needed a rest and he couldn't continue using the same team. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Lampard's been correct like most times this season. Of course, he's still young. He can afford to make mistakes because he's only going to get better himself. So let's not be too harsh on the guy. And on that point, you guys, let's move on to the second talking point. And it does follow on nicely to the first talking point. I want to speak about our fullbacks and the dilemma that Lampard has. Now, I remember telling you guys a few months back that in the training sessions, Lampard had been experimenting with playing Aspie down the left and Reece James down the right. Now, there could be many reasons for this, but I personally feel that Lampard appreciates the experience that Aspie brings to the team. Of course, Lampard did play with Aspie back in the day, so of course Lampard's going to rate the mentality and the professionalism from Azpilicueta. Could Reece and Aspie be the main fullbacks we see throughout the season? I'm really praying that's not going to be the case, because if that is going to be the case, you guys, it's only going to create a lot more issues than positives. Now, as I mentioned in the first point, most teams in the past 10 games have been focusing playing down our right-hand side. We know that Azpilicueta isn't the most press-resistant player, so when you combine these two factors together, you're really asking for a lot of issues and you're asking for a lot of problems. It didn't help that Aspie never had the proper defensive support in front of him. Pulisic and Willian, they weren't there to help come back and help with the ball. If Mason Mount was playing, it could have been a different story, but I'll speak about Mason for the final talking point. Anyway, staying with things, the issue of Aspie playing down the left-hand side, playing against a Valencia team that were creating overloads down that flank, was that it forced Zuma to have to leave his position, pulling himself out wide to help defend with Azpilicueta. And when you're doing that, the distance between your centre-back partners becomes way too big, that communication dies down a bit, things become a lot more reactive, and if the midfield aren't tactically on point or aware, then of course the gaps between the lines are only going to get bigger. But on top of that, you guys, I'm always constantly stressing the importance of fullbacks in Lampard's system. They help support the play, they help create the overloads, they help utilise the free spaces left out wide by wingers or attacking midfield players tucking infield to free the spaces out wide. I looked at the stats in yesterday's game and I saw that Azpilicueta had about a 50% pass completion rate against Valencia. 50% is awful. 50% is terrible. On average, our fullbacks get about 75 to 85% pass completion rate per game. To get 50% less than that isn't good enough, and it keeps painting a very clear and obvious sign that Azpilicueta is a bottleneck in this team. Of course, he has such great attributes, and of course, it is kind of sad in that sense. But if we're moving on to a new modern style of football, then we need to fully embrace it. We need to stop doing this thing of doing the best of both worlds every single time. There's a new world right here, with the young players, the new manager, a new style of football. We need to embrace that. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we disrespect the players like Aspie and stuff. No, it just means that we're moving on to different things. Now, honestly, you guys, in yesterday's game, you could visibly see that players just didn't want to pass Azpilicueta. Zuma did not look comfortable playing to Azpilicueta. Of course, the passing angles are completely different for both him and Zuma. To have two right-footed players on the left-hand side, well, it feels like a bit of a risk, especially if that defender doesn't have those playmaking reducer abilities that you'd want from a ball-playing centre-back. At this point, you guys, I only want to see Azpilicueta playing if we're playing against a team where we need to defend, if Azpi's coming on as a sub to help, shore up the defence, or if we do use a back three system, because that's how you get the best out of Azpilicueta. If you're playing an open game of football, I don't really think he's your guy. When he gets targeted, he really gets targeted, and it's very hard for him to get back in the game and offer anything else. At this point, Lampard needs to have the same patience that he has for Azpi and apply that with Emerson and with Reece. It's about time that these guys play together. The more times they play together, it's only going to help out the team. And you guys, on that point, we move on to the final talking point, and I need to speak about Mason Mount and whether our team is suffering without Mason Mount playing in the first team. Now, since Mason's lost his place in the team, we haven't actually won a game just yet. Now, of course, I know it's only been 2 games. It's not enough to say anything, but you can see patterns, you can see signs, and I think we need to appreciate the skills that Mason Mount brings to the team. Now, for me personally, whenever I think of Mason Mount, I think of better team balance. Now, as you guys can see on screen, these are 2 games against Watford and Palace, and look at the team shape. Look at the average positionings of the players in the team. It looks very balanced. And it's no surprise why we look much tighter in games like that and why we look so good. I know I keep showing you guys the Valencia game, but honestly, it wasn't good enough. And it was no surprise why we didn't go to the Mestalla getting all 3 points. And I think the main reason why we miss Mason Mount is his build-up play, his intelligence, and his selfless teamwork with the team. When you win games of football, you guys, you need characters in your team that have the mentality to win, the mentality to fight for the team, and the mentality to do the boring teamwork stuff that most players don't like doing. Now, one player that I always think of who's one of the greatest examples of this style of player was Michael Ballack. Michael Ballack was a player that was basically like having a manager on the field. Ballack was so selfless. I remember the game for Germany against Costa Rica. On the field, he told the team, listen, I'm going to be sitting back alongside Torsten Frings. We're going to be 4-4-2. That's how we're going to do it. And it was no surprise that Germany got a 4-2 win against them. There were so many examples of Ballack doing the same thing playing for us. Playing in a team with Essien and Lampard, it meant that Ballack had to play a more sacrificial role. A different type of role which was more supportive to help what we do in the final third. And Mason Mount's the same player that has that same team mentality. Now, I think players that definitely suffer without Mason tend to be the wingers. Now, when I'm looking at Pulisic, he's looking very good, he's looking very inventive, but without Mason Mount, you don't tend to see Pulisic finding himself in the box as much. And that's because with Mason Mount, he's the type of player where if Pulisic's drifting sides, Mason Mount's going to cover his position. It's simple things like that, you guys, but most players aren't doing that. On top of all of that, Mason Mount's speed between the lines, his play between the lines, the positioning, the selflessness, the teamwork, the press resistance. How many times has he won important tackles in the opposition's half, which has forced very good goals, counter-attacks, or dangerous opportunities? That isn't the case when he isn't in the team. Still though, I understand the dilemma that Lampard's in right now. Can we afford to not play with Kante, Kova and Jorginho in the same team? I've always felt like we'll have to sacrifice one of these guys in the midfield. I think all 3 together, even though they have very good points, especially the build-up phase and how they break teams down and the defensive work at times, I still think there's other qualities that combining all 3 players together, they don't really bring. And at this point, you guys, I'd probably say Kova, Kante with Mason Mount playing in front of them. That would be best for team balance and keeping our defensive structure off the ball, because as you see, if the pressing up top isn't on point, if we're not balanced out or spaced out well enough, well, it becomes very easy for teams to create counter-attacks against us. And we've been punished by this time and time again this season. That connecting player that we need in the final third in the middle, I feel like we missed that. Mason Mount was so important for dragging players out of position. He was like a magnet, attracting players to free up space for other players to run into. Hopefully Lampard is going to reintroduce him back into the team for the next game. And you guys, on that point, I'm going to wrap things up and keep things moving. Now, thank you for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe. If you do like today's video, don't forget to smash that like button. Help me get over 1,500 likes. I'm NiniFC. This is Blue Lions TV. See you guys in a bit.